When I married Alessandro, I had no idea that I would also be taking on his family. Not in the touching sense that I would be welcomed into the house with open arms and called a daughter, but in the most literal sense, with his mother, Beatrice, and sister Clara, who were used to considering themselves the center of the universe and could not come to terms with the fact that now his life had its own nest, our home, where they had no right to dictate their rules. Alessandro was always gentle with me, caring, supportive in everything, and I knew that his love was sincere. But as soon as the conversation touched on his mother or sister, he seemed to turn into a boy who was too afraid to say no. And over time, he completely stopped trying to protect me. Beatrice treated me from the very beginning as something tolerable but inconvenient, like a splinter that can't be pulled out, and so you have to walk around with it, not admitting to yourself that the pain is becoming habitual. The first time she came into our kitchen, she slowly ran her hand over the wooden table, glanced sideways at my pots of herbs on the windowsill, and said, "How lovely. Well, after all, country girls can survive in the suburbs too." Clara, who was sitting next to her, immediately curled her lips into a grin and added, "Wait until she starts feeding you boiled potatoes 3 nights in a row." I laughed then, deciding that this was their strange humor, that they were making fun of me in a family way, but it turned out that no, there was nothing in their words except contempt. I worked remotely for a logistics company, and in my free time I helped my parents with their small farm near the city. My life was not glossy, but it was real, filled with work and care, in which I found meaning. But for Beatrice, the idea that her son had tied the knot with a woman who picked vegetables, not expensive bags, was almost a crime. When our daughter Marta was born, the pressure from them only increased. Beatrice decided that she knew better than me what her granddaughter should eat, and brought sweets, although I begged her to be mindful of the child's allergies. Clara would walk into my kitchen without knocking and, in front of Marta, would sarcastically comment on my dishes. "Are you seriously going to raise her on steamed vegetables and oatmeal? No wonder the child is bored." I bit my lips and kept quiet, swallowing the humiliation over and over again for the sake of peace, for Martuska, for Alessandro, who looked away and pretended not to hear. And then one day, Beatrice came to me in tears. I had never seen her so distraught. "Ganna was in a terrible accident," she said breathlessly. "Her car crashed at an intersection. The doctors say it will take months to recover. Her leg is badly damaged." I caught my breath. "Oh my God, is she okay?" Beatrice was trembling, and her eyes gleamed with cold calculation under the mask of grief. "That's why I came, Sophia. She needs support." Real support. Her gaze slid to the envelope with our savings on the bookshelf, $10,000 that I was putting aside for greenhouse equipment for the farm. "I would never ask, but this is family," she said, placing her hand on mine. Alessandro was at work at the time, and I was left alone with my confusion. The pressure, the guilt, her skillful play on my emotions did their job. I gave her the money. After that, Clara seemed to disappear. She was supposedly recovering at a friend's, too weak to see anyone, too sedated to talk. But Beatrice continued to come to me every other day, asking me to help with the cooking, to run errands, to bring groceries so that the poor thing would not be nervous. "But I've never even seen her," I said one day, and Beatrice frowned. "She's exhausted. You know how recovery goes. Just do me one more favor." Alessandro, as always, did not interfere. If Mama says Clara is in pain, then it is. And I carried on carrying it all. Work, home, Marta, helping my parents on the farm, and the weight of that quiet lie that was already pulsing in the air, even though I couldn't quite grasp its meaning. And then one Saturday, it all came crashing down. Alessandro was in the garage fiddling with the car. His phone vibrated on the kitchen table. I was vacuuming when I saw the screen light up. Mom was calling. Before I could reach it, Marta grabbed it first. "Grandma's calling, Daddy." "Mom, can I answer?" I held out my hand. "Martha, wait." But she had already pressed the green button and put the phone on the counter, putting it on speakerphone. There was no greeting, just a booming background, and then Beatrice's voice. Just make sure Marta is outside when it happens. Let's say Sophia lets her play up front. My body went rigid. And then I heard Clara's voice, lazy and cold. And if she falls near the driveway, it'll be easy to blame the sidewalk. Exactly, Beatrice replied. Sophia won't even notice. She's always in her head. Martha looked up at me. Mom, why is Grandma talking about me? I couldn't answer. Grabbing my phone from the table, I quickly opened the voice recording app and hit the record button. The call continued. He'll side with us if he thinks Sophia is careless, Clara said. This is about his daughter, Beatrice countered. Once we prove she's unfit, he won't have a choice. My fingers were shaking. My stomach was in a tight knot. I tried to end the call, but only one thought was racing through my head. What did I just hear? I stared at Martha, who had gone quiet, clutching her shabby fox in her arms and looking at me so seriously that my heart almost broke. And I just whispered, Honey, we're going for a drive, trying to sound calm and confident, although a storm was raging inside me. She nodded and ran to her room, and a few minutes later I was sitting in the car, feeling her favorite toy under my arm, as if it were a symbol of the only thing that remained truly valuable to me. No suitcases, no change of clothes, not even a toothbrush, just Martha next to me and the phone on my lap, which was still playing a conversation that I wanted to never hear. But now it was my only protection. I headed straight to my parents' house. The road seemed to stretch on forever, and when my father opened the door, I did not even find the words in myself. I simply handed him the phone, pressed play, and watched as his face remained still, but his eyes grew darker. My mother clutched her chest, clutching the edge of her robe as if she were trying to hold on to the fabric so she wouldn't collapse. They want to make it look like an accident, I whispered, my voice shaking. So Alessandro will think I was negligent, and then they can... I couldn't finish. The words caught in my throat, but my father nodded slowly, as if he already understood. You're not going back there, he said quietly, firmly. We're going to file a report. They have to be stopped. Later that night, I tucked Marta into the bed she hadn't slept in since college, and though she was confused, she snuggled into the pillow and, hugging her fox, asked, Mom, are we safe here? I tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear and smiled. Yes, honey, we're safe here. She sighed and hugged the stuffed animal tighter. Down below, I saved the recording to the cloud, wrote a statement, and began researching lawyers. That evening, I no longer cried or screamed. I planned, and this feeling of power was new to me, but absolutely necessary. In the morning, I woke up in my childhood room, my heart still pounding, and the familiar walls seemed to shrink and press down on me. The old dresser creaked, the blinds gathered dust, the ceiling seemed low, as if I were a helpless girl again. But I knew I was not the same. I called the police, and the calm voice of an officer said, We understand your concerns, ma'am. But until no harm has been done and members of your family were involved, we cannot intervene. I stared at the phone. No crime? They were planning to harm my child, but the woman on the other end of the line just repeated, Until anything happens, it's an uncertainty. Keep the recording and stay with the people you trust. I quietly hung up, her words echoing in my head, the people you trust. My list of those people was alarmingly short. My parents were silent that morning. My father was frying eggs, turning them so slowly as if each movement was deliberate. My mother poured coffee but didn't look up at me. And Marta, unsuspecting, chased the dog around the kitchen island, her laughter cutting through the tense silence, and the word Beatrice was not said until finally my mother asked, What did Alessandro say? I shook my head. He doesn't know yet. I want to prepare before I talk to him. My mother frowned. Are you sure he'll believe you? I looked at her, then at Marta, who was drawing hearts with her finger on the fogged-up window, and admitted honestly, I don't know. But he needs to hear the truth from me. With the evidence in hand, I waited for 3 days, needing breath, strength, an inner core. Then I wrote to Alessandro, "I want to talk. Come to the house. Take your mother with you." His answer was alarmingly short. "Are you okay?" I typed, "No, but come anyway. We need to clear this up." He agreed, too naively and simply, as if this were another family scene that could be played out and forgotten. That day, for the first time since the escape, I returned home, but not alone. My father insisted on coming with me, and although he stayed in the car, parked on the street, I knew that his presence was my fortress. The house smelled of stale coffee and lavender-scented detergent, all of it a reminder of their control over every little thing. I opened the windows, aired the rooms, turned on the light in the living room, put the phone on the table, and waited. At exactly 5 o'clock, the door opened and Alessandro entered first, tired, confused, but still my husband, trying to understand what was going on. "Sophia, we're here," he said, peering into the living room. Beatrice followed him, her face deliberately neutral, like the mask of a pious mother who was up to no good. And then I saw Clara. She walked in easily, without crutches, without a cast, not even limping, and her eyes looked at me straight and boldly, as if she were challenging me, not intending to justify herself. "I thought you were hurt," I blurted out sharply. Clara bowed her head and feigned bewilderment. "What?" But Beatrice quickly stepped forward. "Sophia, that's unnecessary. We came because you look upset." I didn't let her finish. I pressed the play button and the recording began to play in the living room. Their voices were unmistakable. Beatrice's calculated phrases, Clara's cold answers, a plan to make me look like a negligent mother, to deprive me of Marta. Alessandro turned pale. His hands trembled. "What is this?" he whispered. "Martha answered the phone by accident," I said. "She heard it. I recorded it." Beatrice grinned, her voice venomous. "It can be edited." Anyone can splice voices together these days. Clara laughed loudly, almost defiantly. "Do you seriously think he'll believe it?" "Maybe you need help, Sophia?" But then Alessandro turned to her, his gaze steady for the first time. "Where were you last week?" he asked. Clara was confused, blinking as if cornered for the first time. "What? I'm in a private clinic. Out of state." "Which clinic?" His voice was colder than I'd ever heard it, and I could see his hand shaking as it gripped the doorframe. "It doesn't matter," Beatrice interjected, taking a step forward, her tone taut as a string about to snap. "She needed rest, that's all. That's the most important thing." "No." Alessandro cut her off sharply, and I felt the air in the room quiver with his unfamiliar resistance. "You said she was in rehab, that she couldn't walk, that her condition was serious. You took $10,000 from Sophia's savings, and now she comes barging in here without a single scar, acting like nothing happened." Clara crossed her arms over her chest like a shield and grinned defiantly. "So what? Are you on her side now?" Alessandro looked lost, his eyes darting between his mother, his sister, and mine, torn between two worlds that could never coexist. I took a step forward, anger and fear tangling in my chest. "I didn't want to believe it either," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "But this isn't about sides. This is about our daughter. Your daughter." They were discussing how to make it look like I was neglecting Marta, so they could take her away from me. Clara rolled her eyes and waved her hand away as if she were an annoying fly. "Oh, please." It was hypothetical. "Enough!" Beatrice hissed, steel creaking in her voice. Alessandro turned to her sharply. "Did you say those words?" She paused only for a moment, then spoke quickly, as if she had rehearsed them. "I was excited. You were suspended, and Sophia was acting paranoid." "That's not an answer," he snapped. Beatrice flushed, her eyes narrowing. "I was protecting Martha by exposing her to harm," he shouted, and the silence fell upon us, deafening us all. Clara looked away for the first time, her confidence wavering. "But we didn't do anything. It's impossible to prove intent." I pulled out the other phone, the one that belonged to my mother, and held it up for everyone to see. "The information is already saved." In the cloud, with my lawyer, and with 3 other people who will make it public if anything happens to me or Marta." Beatrice's mouth opened and then closed like a fish out of water. Then I said, "And I've already filed a police report. If you don't admit right now that this was all a lie and a fraud, I'll press charges. $10,000 stolen on false medical evidence. An audio recording of you conspiring to endanger a child's life." Beatrice shuddered so hard that her hands clenched into fists. Clara, who had once been so self-assured, became haggard, her mask crumbling. Alessandro sat down in his chair and clutched his head in his hands, as if the bones had been pulled out of him. "Sophia, why didn't you come to me sooner?" His voice was tight, broken. I stared at him, bitterness rising in my throat. "Because you didn't believe me the first 12 times. You let them knock me down. Every time. I didn't know it was that bad." He looked up, his eyes wide with despair. I took a deep breath and then said firmly, "I want you all out of this house." Clara chuckled, one last attempt at clinging. "This isn't even your house. It's in both of our names." "I've already started the paperwork to change that," I replied calmly. Beatrice opened her mouth, but Alessandro raised his hand, stopping her. "Mama, Clara, go away. Are you on her side?" Clara muttered, but there was no answer. He just looked at me, devastated. I watched them leave. Clara slammed the door sharply, defiantly, and Beatrice walked slowly, as if she couldn't believe that her defeat had become reality. As the lock clicked, Alessandro asked in a hoarse voice, "What now?" I looked at him point blank. "Really? Now Marta will stay with me. My parents are applying for temporary custody in case something happens. And you have to decide who you want to be, her father or their son." He swallowed, his eyes shining. I added quietly, almost in a whisper, "Because you can't be both." He was silent. I went upstairs and closed the door behind me. The next morning, Beatrice tried to call. I blocked her number. Then Clara called from another, and I blocked her too. Alessandro wrote a message. "Can I see Marta?" But before I could answer, there was a knock on the door. I opened the door to see a man in a black suit. "Are you Sophia?" he asked, and my heart sank. I nodded. "Sorry to call you unannounced," he continued, showing his ID. "I'm from the sheriff's office. We have an update on your fraud report. Can we talk?" I froze on the porch, my heart pounding so hard it was ringing in my ears. "A fraud report?" I asked. "Is something wrong?" He nodded. "We're investigating the materials you provided, an audio recording related to a $10,000 fraud and a possible plot to harm your daughter. We've already confirmed that no medical facility has a record of Clara with her name and date of birth. She hasn't been treated anywhere." The air rushed out of my chest in a jerk, as if I hadn't been breathing the entire time. "The district attorney is preparing to open a formal investigation into fraud, child endangerment, conspiracy, and false medical statements for personal gain," he continued. "We'll be in touch in the next few days. In the meantime, if Beatrice or Clara contact you again, please let us know right away." I nodded, my voice shaking. "Thank you." When the door closed behind him, my legs gave way beneath me, and I slid to the floor by the wall where Marta's drawings still hung, taped down with colored tape. I ran my hand over the crooked hearts and houses drawn in crayon, and only then did I allow myself to exhale. It wasn't the end, but rather the beginning, quiet and heavy, like a new dawn after a long night, when the air is still cold, but you can already feel the approach of light. That same day, I sat with my parents at the old kitchen table where we had once discussed grades and summer plans, and now I told them everything again, only not with the desperate fear that had choked me before, but with greater clarity and confidence in every word. I showed them the message from Alessandro. "Can I come to Marta?" Dad leaned forward, placing his palms on the table, and asked quietly but firmly, "Do you trust him?" "No," I answered directly, without averting my eyes, "but Marta loves him, and I want her to have a choice if he decides to be a better person." We agreed to meet in a public park near my parents' house, where Marta could feel safe and secure, where the swings and children's laughter dissolved any tension. Alessandro arrived alone, and his face showed the insomnia of the last few nights. The shadows under his eyes, the tight lips, the slumped shoulders. He saw Marta and immediately knelt down on the damp grass. Without a second's hesitation, she rushed to him, crying out joyfully, "Daddy!" I let the moment take place, standing a little to the side, crossing my arms, and my mother silently holding my elbow. As Marta ran toward the swing, he finally came closer. "I want to talk," he said tiredly. I pointed to a bench and we sat down. He was breathing hard, the words coming hard to him. I didn't know about the call, what they were planning. I was blind. "Nothing," I said calmly. I knew Clara's story was falling apart, but I hoped it was just weakness, a need for attention. She needed help, but not the kind that came with money. He looked down, his fingers shaking. "I've listened to that tape over and over." "I don't know how I couldn't see the signs." "You saw them," I said quietly. "You just ignored them." He nodded slowly, as if accepting the verdict. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. "I'm sorry I didn't protect you, that I doubted you, that I let them get this far." I blinked the stinging moisture from my eyes. "I filed fraud papers," I said evenly. "You might be called as a witness." He nodded. "I'll cooperate fully." We sat in silence for a moment, listening to Martha laugh on the swing. Then he said, "I know this won't fix anything, but I've contacted my lawyer to remove Mom's name from the power of attorney that was for Clara. I won't be helping them anymore." "That's your choice," I said. "But know this, Martha and I are safe now. And we always will be." He looked straight at me. "Does this mean that we're done?" I met his gaze. "I guess it means we're not who we were anymore. Maybe we never were." He hung his head. "I still want to be her father." "Then be him," I said. "That doesn't require marriage papers. That requires actions." A few weeks passed. Beatrice tried calling again, this time hiding her number, but I didn't answer. And soon Clara's name appeared in the local newspaper. She had been arrested for falsifying an insurance policy, using the same injury to obtain disability benefits. An anonymous tip led investigators straight to her. She had forged medical certificates, provided fictitious documents, and used Alessandro's name as a financial guarantor. That evening, he called me. "She's been arrested," he said. "I know. And my mother is now under investigation for complicity." She signed letters from the hospital. I didn't gloat or celebrate. I simply replied, "Every action has a consequence." 2 months later, Alessandro came to Marta's violin recital. He brought a bouquet of daisies, sat quietly in the audience, and applauded so loudly that his clapping drowned out the others. When Martha saw him in the crowd, her face lit up, and later she whispered to me, "Daddy clapped the loudest." He began seeing her every other weekend. We only saw each other in public places. He respected boundaries, didn't push, didn't rush, and I gradually learned to breathe freely. One night, when Martha was already asleep in her bed at my parents', I stood by the window and watched the yellow leaves swirl in the wind. So much of my life had burned away, but not everything. I had a daughter. I had the truth. I had my name back, my life back, and I would never let anyone take that away from me again. Clara was sentenced to 18 months probation and required to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Beatrice was cleared of the charges on a technicality, but her reputation was destroyed. She was removed from the board of directors of the charity, and her name was removed from Anoni's legal documents. Alessandro kept coming to Marta, not perfectly, but sincerely, and I finally understood the difference between forgiveness and oblivion. You can forgive, but never forget, and that was enough.